And we are now live.
All right. This is Senate Appropriations Committee, and we are continuing our testimony on the FY 2022 budget. And with us today is Commissioner Walk from the Department of Environmental Conservation. I can see you have Kim Greenwood with you. Do you have other staff? If so, Commissioner, please introduce them to us.
Be happy to. Thank you, Senator. For the record, Peter Walk, Commissioner of the Department of Environmental Conservation. As you mentioned, I'm joined by Deputy Commissioner Kim Greenwood, along with Joanna Polito and Tracy LaFrance, who know this budget better than anybody and can help answer some of the detailed questions. I know you've had.
We're going to leave that up to the House. You know, we kind of go, as you know, because our time is more limited.
Right.
We really like to use this opportunity for you to give us the highlights of your budget. Some of the budgets, except for maybe some one-time initiatives, seem to be pretty level funded. And I know that you've got some work underway, particularly with the climate plan. And so that it would give us a chance to kind of have you brief us on some of the work and some of the initiatives that have been sort of sent your way as a result of legislative action. So you probably, there's Emily Byrne. She's here to monitor everybody.
Yeah, and Secretary Moore is here as well. So
oh my!
This is
the gang's all here.
But they're watching Peter, not us.
I think that's probably true. Either that or they're here to protect him from
Himself.
From
himself, he said. Oh, Richie.
Isn't it a pleasure to be here at Senate Appropriations?
It is, always.
I'm going to suggest, I remember last year, your budget presentation was just after we got sent home on March 13th and never came back again. And I think we did it by a conference call. And so at least it's nice to be able to see you and your staff in person. But it seems hard to believe that it's been just about a year since we've been able to do business as we normally would. So I think probably you have a document you want to screen share, and I'm going to let you take it from here, Peter, in terms of what you have to present on the budget.
Thank you, Senator. Yes, I have a PowerPoint presentation that I think is more useful than our ups and downs. Our ups and downs is particularly busy this year. Lots of intra movings around that make it pretty busy. So
a lot of something signifying nothing.
Sound and fury.
Not nothing, but not bottom line pieces.
Yeah. All right, very little. Sorry.
All right, let me pull that up.
I'll let Senator Bruce fill in the blanks on that one.
Full of sound and fury, signifying nothing.
Yeah, I know. Sound and fury. All right, now we're back to the DEC budget.
All right, let me pull up that slideshow. All right, let me know if that's in slideshow form for you.
Yep.
All right, great.
Oh, February 17th.
I'm sorry, I am recycling a presentation that I've given previously. I hope you will forgive me.
Yeah. Well, that's okay. You want to put all your money on the house, go right ahead.
Wasn't even a money committee in the House. So
Oh, no.
Ouch.
Oh, ouch.
Fish and
Peter, that was
wildlife.
harsh.
but they were tough. So we'll see. Anyways. So
Well,
just
then-
want to quickly go through a quick overview by source and by expense, and then your major things that we're talking about. And then we have some activity in our sort of moving around of positions. I think that Julie and Emily Byrne probably mentioned when they were in here, and then talk a little bit about one-time investments. And then frankly, I'm probably going to skip over the ups and downs because in this form, it is practically unreadable in its blurriness. So just a quick overview as a reminder, we are significantly funded through federal funds along with various special funds end up being about 8% of general fund and 8% permit funds. And then as a reminder, we spend a significant portion of our budget, and much of the fluctuation year to year in our budget is in the sort of grants and contracts component in pass-through money to work that included. And included in this year's, in this number for this year is the $10 million in proposed money to go to the ECF. 5 million of that was proposed to be spent on testing in schools for PCBs. Just to highlight there. Quick summary of where we are. We have estimated pay act increases of almost $300,000. We are carrying vacancy savings at $1.35 million, which is an increase over what we typically carry, but what we think we can manage. Right now, we have 5 vacant positions that we have not budgeted for. 2 of those will be transferred to the A&R central office, the positions themselves, along with about 50,000 in general fund. And then 3 of them we have not budgeted for, and I can speak to those positions in a moment. We do have an overall fluctuation, as I mentioned, in our pass-through grants and contracts of about $3.8 million. We've achieved various operational savings of about $300,000. The 50K that I mentioned to the central office, that's going to support our work in environmental justice, civil rights, and equity and inclusion. And then the transfer of all of our DEC legal services positions to the A&R central office. So Matt Chapman, who you all have worked with many times, can manage the functioning of the legal services across the agency and provide support and make sure that all of our needs across the agency are being met.
How many legal positions are being from DEC are being transferred?
We have 8. Technically, 2 of them were already in the central office in our litigation section. All 8 will be transferred, including 1 of which is vacant currently.
Okay.
So we are the 3 positions that we will hold 3 positions vacant for all of FY22. We have not budgeted for those in our watershed management division. Sorry for the acronym there. That is kind of luck of the draw with vacancy savings. Obviously, we don't get to choose where those are at the time. We may shift those vacant positions around to achieve our priorities. But right now, 2 of those positions are in the wastewater program and 1 is in the lakes and ponds program. And then the proposed one-time, I'm going to break these down into sort of DEC specific and then DEC adjacent, sort of in the climate space where much of our work is focused. I think you've had some discussions already about the Brownfields initiative in combination with ACCD to provide $25 million to clean up contaminated sites across the state. In the mid-2010s, there was an effort spearheaded by A&R, ACCD, and VTrans to prioritize key sites that required cleanup across the state to go along with the Brownfields Reuse Liability Limitation Act umbrella sites. So we are looking to fund a mix of those, both to move to clean up and get them ready for redevelopment, but also to keep the pipeline moving. This is a significant investment. It will not meet the full need, but it is a really important investment. Just to put it into scale and perspective, we have, over the 20 years of EPA funding for brownfields, we've received about double that in 20 years. So this is a really big slug and will have a meaningful impact on our communities.
We did get a list of the proposed sites.
Yeah, so and it's clear that those proposed sites, there are lots of sites. We'll open it up and see who comes in looking for funding. I think the door, we'll open the door wide and get a good view. The BARA sites, which are the ones that were the prioritized sites, we are really hoping to move across the finish line and get them ready for reuse. Those are the sort of major cleanup sites around the state. So for the Environmental Contingency Fund, we have proposed a $10 million transfer from the general fund to the ECF. As we've talked about in years past, the ECF struggles with a long-term funding source. Several years ago, the legislature transferred money from a component of the settlement work with Volkswagen into the ECF to shore it up. It is time for that to happen again. And along with that, we also understood there was a significant interest and need to look at the possibility of PCB testing in schools. I know that there are policy bills happening now around what that testing will look like, but we wanted to make sure that there was funding available. I will say that be clear with everybody that this is funding for testing. The testing process will essentially be those schools that meet certain criteria, which is really a date based criteria, that if they were renovated or built prior to 1980, they would be appropriate for testing because the likelihood of PCB containing building materials would be present. So that is sort of the nature of the testing. The testing will occur, then there will be a review of the data to understand what actions will be necessary. It'll be that site-specific analysis that will be key to determining what's next. So I get a lot of questions about, what does this mean? Do we need to set money aside? What is the cost going to look like? We don't know yet. And so that is the reason why we have set money aside for testing, but have not gone further to this point.
We understand that. And there is some possibility with additional federal money and so much money coming, particularly for schools, that maybe there are some ways of creating, we called it a sinking fund, so to speak, to support work. The other part of this discussion, and it's occurring in the House, and that is looking at our public school infrastructure in a comprehensive way and doing an assessment that would include structural needs to air quality, to radon, to PCB, and depending on the age of the structure, different factors would be evaluated. So this is part of a larger discussion around the health of our public schools. And, if there's a way of funding the testing, whether it's for PCB or any other toxic or whatever as part of this assessment, then that might free up some general fund for something else. So that's just a possibility.
Thank you, Senator. I will flag for the committee that the PCBs in indoor building materials that release to the indoor air are not technically regulated by the Department of Environmental Conservation. If it was in the soils, we would regulate it, or into the groundwater. So we've included notwithstanding language to make the ECF able to fund this money, but just to sort of call your attention to that. We thought it was the appropriate place for that to be, but it isn't technically a release based on current status.
Okay.
Can I just clarify? Madam
Yes,
Chair?
Senator Bruce.
If it wouldn't technically be your department, who would it ordinarily reside with?
There is a bit of a gap there, Senator Bruce.
Meaning nobody?
Meaning it's
Might be Department of Health.
it's a bit of a gray area, and so one we're happy to continue to work through, but that's the reason why we wanted to address it here in this form.
Be good to get that straightened out, that's for sure.
Right. I mean, I understand the notwithstanding language, but should we think about making a permanent statutory fix of the gray area?
So one of the,
That would probably not be done through the budget. I think that would be,
No, understood.
Um,
I'm just-
Senator Westman might put it on his list as a member of Natural Resources. Things that might be, I'm saying it's something that really needs to be addressed. Senator Baruth, maybe we can see if our colleagues, we just bring it to the attention of our colleagues on Natural Resources.
Great.
Senator Bruce, just one quick thing to add. It is something that is in discussion in the policy bills that are being discussed. And so therefore we would find a way to ensure we understand, who has authority at that point. So,
Okay, perfect. Thanks so much.
of course. And then due to increased revenue projections, there is an additional $1.05 million beyond the original Clean Water Fund budget as proposed by the Clean Water Board. And I think I haven't talked with your committee about this, and I'm excited about this work that Deputy Commissioner Greenwood has been leading. We invested some CARES Act money in what we called the Permit Navigator, which allowed Vermonters and Vermont businesses to answer questions online, provide the location of their proposed site, and it would populate with likely permits that they would need. We are excited about the idea of moving forward into phase 2 of that, which will allow more connection between that initial screening and our existing online permit application and review tools, as well as some back-end coordination for our staff to be able to review projects together, not just for sort of a wetlands permit and a stormwater permit, but some combined level of review and coordination. And so,
Commissioner, is that $1 million part of the 53 for IT enhancements, or is this a separate requested appropriation?
maybe Emily Byrne can help me with that one. I think it is part of that, but I'm not entirely sure.
Yes, it's in the 53
Thank
for the
you.
IT fund. Yep.
All right.
Thank you. See, team working together.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, it's impressive. We'll keep going.
And then these are the sort of adjacent ones. I think you've heard about some of these already. The proposal for $25 million in weatherization, $10 million in low and moderate income solar project and community solar projects, and then additional $5 million through the transportation bill in EV incentives, kind of a cash for clunkers model, and more charging infrastructure and other supporting elements. So really pleased with these investments, which will help us reach the requirements as set forth in the Global Warming Solutions Act and the other goals that we all share in addressing climate change.
Okay.
And I think I'm not going to stay there because that's awful.
I love this form.
Yeah, can't read it.
I love the form. I don't love the level of detail necessary so that you has to zoom out so far you can't actually see it.
Oh, no, I have a personal bias toward it. When you have a lot of moving pieces, it's a good way of
It's a great tool for us.
Yeah. So, all right, well, that's your budget presentation. I have one question that'll come up, I'm sure, and that's funding for aquatic nuisance treatment. And last year, I think, we had some communication in terms of the amount of funding that was available. And prior years, you'd had some one-time funding that allowed a higher level of grants to go out. And last year, not as much. Do you have a sense of what that is going to look like? And I think there was a letter that we all were sent from, is it the Lakes and Ponds Association, requesting full funding. And I think sometimes full funding, when you do some one-time add-ons, become the new definition of full funding. But could you just speak to that area?
Sure. We because of some of the concerns around adjustments in the grants that were going out last summer as part of just kind of where we were in the pandemic and trying to ensure that we could, could continue to support good work going forward. We built this budget with the assumption of kind of level funded support for that work. And so there, I don't know, Joanna or Tracy, if you have that number off the top of your head. We probably don't, but we can get that to you, Senator Kitchell.
Okay, well, I just anticipate it's probably going to come up again, depending on what you have for grant applications and how much money you have.
We can confirm that, Commissioner Walk and Senator Kitchell, but I do believe it was level. So I think it's in the $450,000 range that goes out in grants, but we will confirm that and respond back.
Okay. Other questions, the committee?
Yes.
Yeah, Senator Starr.
Yeah, I just wanted to mention to Peter that in our ag committee, we have been working with Kathy Jameson, and what a great job she did on behalf of the agency and working with the ag agency, came up together, the two agencies, with some very good language to put in one of our other bills. And Kathy was a great help on that. The other question I have, it isn't in regards to your budget. I think you guys do a great job. It was in regards to the town of Montgomery is putting a wastewater water storage system in, and I know they've been having some problems with money, and I didn't know if you knew anything about that, but if you could check into that to see what assistance there might be to help them, it would be appreciated.
I am happy to look into that, Senator Starr, and always appreciate the feedback on our staff. Kathy is committed to resolving the chickens and compost issue once and for all.
Yeah, that would be nice.
Oh, is that still to be?
Oh, yeah. It's an annual thing, but I think we've got it licked this time.
Oh, good. Your optimism is noted.
Still
Yeah.
early in the session.
Mhm.
Other questions? Well, as long as we're into local things, we have the old Kennemental in Lindenville, and I don't think that's on the list of brownfields. Is it? But anyway, it seems to be circular where they'd like to sell, but the owner doesn't want to have the testing before it's sold, and that nobody wants to buy it, not knowing what's there. So we seem to be in this circular discussion, and I think you've had some involvement. I've mentioned it to you before. I do know that if we looked around, there were a number of sites in Springfield, I believe. There was the very large Calderwood block in St. Johnsbury that state offices used to be in and has been vacant. It was once again dry cleaner materials seem to be so prevalent. I remember in Rutland, there was a site there. So
Barry
yes.
had a major issue.
Yeah, it seemed like there were quite a few sites that would, if the brownfield problem could be addressed, could really make a difference to a lot of towns around the state.
Senator Kitchell, that's a great point. I think, and this is a plug for Senator Westman, in their review of the technical corrections bill, we brought them, one of the ideas that we brought forward was to address the exact situation where you're talking about, where that like nobody wants to test because they don't want to know, sort of the seller doesn't want to, or the seller doesn't want to know and the buyer needs to know but isn't willing to. We are proposing changes to the BRELA statute that I talked about, the Brownfield Reuse Liability Limitation Act, which to extend that liability protection to prospective buyers so that they can take on some of that work without assuming the liability for the site. And that will enable some of that sort of who's on first, chicken or egg challenge that to be addressed. Won't solve all of it because when we find things, but it will help. And so we're always trying to get to more cleanups, right? Because it isn't always money that's the issue.
Oh, that's good to know that there's a legislative remedy sort of in the works. We'll leave it up to Senator Westman to get that taken care of. I think
I'm sure you will.
I think I just got a nonverbal. Yes, Senator Westman. Senator Nitka,
Just
you have a
wanted to-
question.
With regard to the Springfield site, I mean, one of the problems is the longer things go on without being cleaned up. What happened there is that, there was one type of contamination in the building and then collapsed and then added a different kind of contamination all in the same space. So now I think the issue is trying to sort that out, how they can do all those materials that are now in there. I mean, I know you're working on that site or looking at it. And the longer
Yes,
there, more things happened.
yeah.
They're
We
just-
saw a map of that the other day and the number of different contaminants at that site. You
And
can
now
see how it'd be so
combined.
challenging. Yes, exactly.
What do you do with the contaminated soils? Do you have to take them out of state? Is there a special?
Comes to Coventry.
Oh, Bob.
No, we send it all to Bennington.
Oh, please don't get him going, please.
I don't think Senator Sears heard that.
Oh, he's muted.
I
but
was
he's-
muted, but I heard it. I'm gonna go step off for a minute and go get my notice from DEC.
I will say, so to answer your question, it depends on what the level of contamination in the soils. That is something that comes up a lot. People may have heard the phrase dirty dirt, where if it's lightly contaminated, we do try to manage it as on site as much as possible. But if it's heavily contaminated, there are different options for it, and it's based on what the levels are. Ultimately, the hazardous waste sort of landfills out of state would typically be sort of the end result for the worst.
Yeah.
Other questions of the commissioner or anything you want to know about DEC? How about your plan? In the budget adjustment, we did provide additional resources for you to contract and get expertise. How is that work coming along?
Well, in that regard, then I would defer to Secretary Moore, because she along with Secretary Young are really leading the charge. in administration.
I didn't mean to get us into an Alphonse Gaston. So, all right, I'm directing the
I like
the
deferring
question.
questions up the chain. It's great.
Oh, well, I had thought you were quite concerned about the workload and what we had for staff on hand to support it. So I will
The answer to
redirect my
that is
question.
yes.
No. I was just being very concerned for the workload. Senator Sears, you have
Yes,
your notice?
Well, I do. I have my notice, but I want it noted that I do not live in a contaminated area. I live in a corrective action area.
Well,
That's the,
That sounds much better, I guess, to my insurer.
There's hope for you.
Oh,
That's what they said about me in my third grade report card.
in your corrective action plan for educational attainment.
Yeah.
So obviously there are gradations then when you're talking about the notices going out to people? Should Senator Sears lose sleep over
no,
his
this
notice?
was always part of the effort the full effort to clean up the area. We needed to both first step getting everybody on long-term clean water, and most of that was through the extension of water lines, and then it is the prohibition on drilling of new wells to ensure that we're protected moving forward. And so it's a mix of factors. I think we've talked about this maybe not in this committee, but with some of you before, that the tools to clean up sites are often sort of depends whether it's a discrete area that you could scoop up the contaminated soils and remove them, or if it's a something like Bennington, where with aerial deposition across the entire valley, removing all of the soil of Bennington really wouldn't be practical or feasible. And so we control the access from the sensitive receptors. And so that's primarily drinking water in this context. So
But it does sound nice to be in a corrective action.
we are always working to be corrective when it comes to you, Senator Sears.
But we don't know how you're going to correct the
But
soil.
you say you grow beautiful raspberries, so look.
I
you
do.
know,
I
they're-
tell you, my raspberries have never been better.
Oh.
You know, I think of the neighbor, you know.
Uh-huh.
Well, it wasn't Dr. Levine, it was Harry Chen, who Dr. Ford Levine told me that, you know, that as long as it didn't grow in the ground like a carrot or a potato, I was fine.
I think the
So
science
I'm trusting
on
his science on raspberries.
Yeah, I would trust Dr. Chen's science as well. I think the evolution of what we know about all of the PFAS chemicals is continuing to evolve. And certainly interested, Senator Starr's heard some of this already in his committee about how do we evaluate the uptake in various plant life, and then ultimately up the food chain as we go. So these chemicals are forever chemicals for a reason. They don't go anywhere. They don't break down.
I guess you don't want to plant an asparagus bed then.
No more
No.
potato. I used to have pretty good potato luck with potatoes and,
Oh, well,
those types of things.
I guess they've restricted your
Yeah,
produce.
it's all part of my lawsuit.
I do have a question, and Emily is listening. We are looking at a separate funding bill because we know that there are some things that we have one-time money, and there are advantages to moving money out for certain activities or projects where there's a seasonality. In other words, you could, if you had the money, projects would be ready to go, and you could take advantage and start in April or early May and get some lead time as opposed to waiting until the big budget bill is passed. And so I don't know, do you have any out of the list, or do you have, for example, if we wanted to do something on brownfields and your priorities, are there any that you feel that if that money was released immediately that you could move swiftly?
So, and Emily and I have had a chance to discuss this back and forth, and there's a couple of different ways you could slice it. What my preference is for the way that we've already sliced it, which is the $14 million to go to DEC was partnered with an $11 million one time to ACCD. And that was really envisioned as a sort of a 1-2 punch, a year one, year two effort. Whereas year one, we would focus on the big picture BERA cleanups, as well as moving forward our evaluation of various sites that could then be moved to cleanup in year two, potentially sooner if ready. And so that was kind of how we envisioned that working. It is difficult to break out exactly which sites will be immediately ready now, but it will get us moving forward in all of the contracting work that we need to do to stand up. And that's the reason why we can be efficient, is we can bring on standby contractors, the environmental consultants who do the analysis work for these sites to move quickly and sort of cut out the step of having to give the money to a property owner and then have that work happen. And so we can get moving on that quickly. It will take time, obviously, but if we could get going now, we could get going now rather than in July. And potentially that gives us more of the construction season this year to work with. So we made the recommendation to the House that if you're going to include some of those monies in a second budget adjustment, or however you're titling it, that $14 million would be good to move, because we could get all of the process moving. I can guarantee you we won't be able to spend or encumber all of it by the July 1st, but all of it will be 3 months ahead and potentially get further along in this construction season.
That sounds.
Can it part be fast tracked because it's more, obviously you're not, as opposed to making a decision about all 14 move out and be obligated in the next 2 weeks?
Sorry, can you ask that question again? I'm not sure.
The governor has got a list of 211 million and how he would like to spend it. There, we may have some differences in terms of how, or whether we find that there are other funding sources, and therefore we might not fund something off that list. But the more we obligate in the next 2 weeks, the less ability you have to make future decisions. So my question was around the 14 million. I understand it would help, but would it, at this point, if we said, we are not comfortable moving out that full amount at this point, if we moved out 7 million, does that help you appreciably, or doesn't amount to anything, I guess is my question.
It does. It starts to some of those bigger projects, the price tags are pretty large. And so we'd only be, so there are two of them, one 453 Pine and the J&L site in Springfield are north of $5 million projects a piece. And so, sort of if you, the $14 million built in the thought that we could do all of those and move forward with the other ones. So if we just have to figure out who was ready first. And I don't necessarily love picking that winners and losers and then set up a second process in a 3 months time.
Okay,
So,
I understand that.
Sounds like it would be cheaper to do it all at once and do the whole 14 and work on both projects.
Well, it depends on how they're divvying up in their planning, the 14 to DEC and the 11 to ACCD. And I don't know in terms of the timing and which projects, or whether we're talking about blending the funding that's flowing to two agencies. It's really hard to, I don't have a sense of that right now, but that maybe Emily and Stephanie can, if there's something that makes sense to move out, because you said it was like a 2-year project. You saw it as year 1, year 2.
So I would say that in our discussions with ACCD, they're really focused on that second phase, which is likely year 2. And so if you're going to split it, it would be the 14 this year or now, and you could wait till the 11 to the normal budget process.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Other questions? I'm scanning my screen. I don't see any. Okay. If they're not, then I guess we can let you get back to your other work, and appreciate your being with us this afternoon. Our next, I don't know, are we ahead of schedule?
You are ahead of schedule by about 15 minutes.
Okay. Oh, all right. We're quite efficient, here. Maybe we should torture you a bit longer. We have a quarter of an hour.
I'm here. It's a Friday afternoon. If you want to torture me a little more, I'll take it happily.
No, I don't think so.
Somebody's got a permit that they'd like me to inquire about, or something. I'm happy to answer questions.
Don't worry, I'm sure there's no hesitation to get in touch. So I think we will then let you go, and then we'll decide, committee, do we want to take a 15-minute break, or maybe there's some discussion we can go. I'm going to go offline, and thank you very much, everyone from DEC and all the people that are there from the central office who are monitoring your every movement.